7th, 2024, and we're focused on a Digital World Town Hall meeting. Just a brief update, primarily around things that have advanced over this last week. The agenda will go something like this, a general update, and then just questions. If you have any, feel free to log on. We're actually meeting at meet.securemeet.com/clear. We're grateful for those that are in attendance with us, specifically those that help us from an administrative and support standpoint. Wally and Elle, thanks for always being here. I did connect with Terrence yesterday. So this is a private membership association. Some of the things we'll talk about may be forward-looking. One of the biggest updates this last week is primarily around the inclusion, the formal inclusion of the Clear Homes, and we're actually going to be launching a $5 million specific kickoff for that, which we'll talk a little bit about, probably not today, but it is something that's material that we'll be talking about in the coming weeks, specifically probably over this next week. So that's formal there. The other thing that we touched on last week was around Clear Finance. And so that's something that's also going to formally go live, primarily because of some of the things we'll talk about with digital assets being connected to physical assets and then being an on-ramp and off-ramp as it will for physical things such as precious metals, maybe precious gold, precious silver, if you want to call it precious, and then unique forms of it that's actually serialized. So for those of you that were here last week, you kind of understand what that was about, but we're grateful for you taking the time to understand this week. We're also proud to announce that we've kicked off a new ecosystem in Arizona. We won't be specific at this time. There's actually 2 of them that will kick in, but Clear Finance will actually be based out of this ecosystem. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, as well as some of the other things going on in Utah. We'll jump right into some of the parts and pieces. There's an insurance element that ties to some of the asset-backed elements that we've talked about, and an auditing component to it as well. So when we look at how parts and pieces look, for those of you that have not actually used some of the different apps, and you'll notice there's a new inclusion of a look and feel, which we'll talk a little bit about, but basically the ability to have assets that are cryptographically secured based upon the individual's identity that could span anything around precious metals, currencies, equities, or commodities. So again, currencies, equities, or commodities. We've actually been working on those particular categories since 2017, 2018, with some of the largest infrastructure and ecosystems in the world, namely those that actually created standards for the American dollar back in 1933, which is a different conversation, but one that the history books and maybe many decades will actually review. But when you look at land and you look at things that are in the earth, above the earth, and mined from the earth, there's an element of basically tokenization around using derived keys that are tied to serial numbers that can also be combined. So we'll talk a little bit more about those, and then kind of how auditing can occur, how assets can actually gain on reputation. For those that are not aware, assets, individuals, and businesses or organizations can actually get their own reputation. And then how you can tie your normal everyday types of things into this ecosystem. And you'll notice here, there's actually elements of different types of currencies and commodities and equities all wrapped into one system. So we'll talk a lot about that, or for those of you that are actually using some of them, you can actually start seeing it within the apps. You'll notice that there's actually a style and a brand that's removed here. It's by design. There's some new stuff that we hope to be able to launch. We won't spell it out, but for those that are paying attention, you'll be able to see potentials of what it could be. Won't be formally announced, so can't divulge it today. But basically what you're looking at is actually a interface that can show your currencies or your equities or your commodities within a single interface. You're already seeing them on your phone, but you've never been able to see it when you log in. And that's actually what's being developed currently. So you'll see different types of assets, both what we call savings assets and checking assets. Savings assets are like Ethereum, takes 3 minutes to transfer. Bitcoin takes 10 minutes to transfer. Both of those are averages, not spending a lot of gas, but the net is the ecosystem we're talking about here. It's fast and it's inexpensive. That's why it will be the future. But the key is it's got to be able to be very usable. So what you're seeing is some of the advancements, again, storage assets or savings assets on the right, And then on the left, you'll actually have new types of assets that will be backed with specific, not just inventory and serialization and audits, but also with insurance. So we're excited to kind of review that and get to the details of it. I know that this body had some positive feedback with it last week. There'll also be some simple ways to be able to have other assets from different countries, so foreign exchange capabilities. And that's one of the reasons why Clear Finance is actually going live as an organized entity and will actually go and raise funds to actually back that. We believe that foreign exchange is one of the things that is actually controlling humanity in a very negative way. For instance, actually, you know what? I'm going to pull up. No, I'll just talk to it. So the International Monetary Fund limits what developing countries can actually do as far as buy and sell their currency. And that limits the foreign exchange value of it. So what the rates are. So think about, it's kind of like the stock market. After hours, you can't trade. They shut it down. On the weekends, you can't trade. They shut it down. If a certain stock in particular slides too much in one day and decreases in value too much, they stop it, turn it back on. If it continues to slide, they'll shut it down for the full day. That's not true fair market value. That is manipulation, if you ask me. Yes, when you look at some of the fair market value assets like Bitcoin, there may be some volatility, but I promise you, it's because of how the mining and the ownership is actually being done and not a true representation of fair market value. So when you really understand foreign exchange and how these other bodies, namely the International Monetary Fund, the World Development Bank, that's tied to the Reserve Bank. So these ecosystems are all connected behind the scenes, and they just come up and make up these laws where if you have a bank with deposits, then you can times it by X or 11 or 9. You know, it continues to fluctuate, and that's fractional bank lending. And that's actually why Bitcoin is around, to be honest with you. The people that created Bitcoin created it in such a way where they were tired of the manipulation with fractional bank lending and the insurance companies that were behind it. And what I mean by that is in 2008, 2007, 2008, when that crash occurred, it was right after that that you saw this type of an asset actually get relinquished into the wild. But Bitcoin was a litmus test. It wasn't something that can do the things that we're talking about today. Like literally these types of things where we're talking real-time assets, real-time serialization, passing from generation to generation, so that really governments don't continue to get bigger. Why would I say something crazy like that? Because every single year, well, I shouldn't say every state, but a majority of the states gain hundreds of millions of dollars in value. You know how? By unclaimed assets by people that pass away and the next generations don't understand what they actually had. So there's a lot of that goes on. And in this type of ecosystem, when people start using this type of system, it can be transparent. Everyone can see, but they may not know who's behind it. But you can see things that move, etc. So these things are some material advancements, very important, very key. And we hope to be able to tie that into some of the things that we're talking about within the country/state of Texas/Texan. So for those of you that are not aware with that, well, I'll talk about that in a second. The similar type thing that happened within the Hawaiian Kingdom, and for those that are not aware, the Hawaiian Kingdom, some people may call it other things, but based upon my research, Hawaiian Kingdom is what the majority of folks referred to it as. Some call it the Kingdom of Hawaii. Some folks call it the Hawaiian Islands, Hawaiian Archipelago. But there's been huge advancements, primarily after leaving the Hawaiian Islands, around bodies coming forth and organizing themselves. So what you see here are two different brands. You're looking at one that's the Kingdom of Hawaii, in the plate in the center in red, and up in the top left, the Hawaiian Kingdom. So right now, as a matter of fact, I met with a gentleman this morning here in the state that I'm currently in. I won't be specific right now, but the Kingdom of Hawaii king, been spending a lot of time with that individual, wonderful individual, good heart, but really trying to understand the right way to be able to enable this type of technology within the Hawaiian Islands. And how does that link to the Texas ecosystem? Well, it just so happens both of them were countries that were occupied within the 1830s to 1840s. So within the same decade, they were both basically taken to a different ecosystem. And why would I bring up something like this? Well, it just so happens I've had now 3 run-ins with different officers. So I park in crazy places. I'm trying to actually get it. I have not been able to get a ticket, or I actually tried. One officer did say he was going to arrest me, but I wasn't able to get arrested. I should not do that kind of stuff. But basically, this was in Sedona, Arizona, and we're driving around with these plates. We're driving around with plates that are cryptographically created based upon a derived key from my private keys and my fingerprint that links to my phone. And so we're basically going through, we're trying to get a precedent set. We've also been able to meet with what they call constitutional sheriffs. There was an organization in Nevada that we went and met with there. And then in Texas, we have a meeting with a sheriff association, which is all the way across the United States. And we're working with them to actually show them how these plates work and asking for them to be able to support it. We're not threatening to say, hey, you're violating human rights if you don't support privacy and the ability to travel, but we are showing them a new way. And so the goal is to have those interactions with that ecosystem come out positive. Now, why am I showing you this interface? First off, it's a new interface. But imagine the ability to be able to purchase a plate, which we haven't been able to do historically, but to be able to purchase it after you enter in, and you're not forced to use email. For those that are not aware, we actually had an email system. We couldn't get the derived keys authenticated. We had the same issue with the online meeting system, kind of like what we're using now with a bunch of folks from all around the world. But it theoretically can be done. We just didn't have the funds and the time to get it done, but we will circle back around on that. So you'll have an email address that will pop up that will use derived keys that can even forward into other email systems. So your identity can truly be masked. So take this to the next step. What do you do once you put in an address? Well, then you get to pay for it. And you can pay for it with digital assets such as the dollar or native or other countries, hopefully some things with the kingdom of Atui and the Kala can be realized. We'd love to plug that puppy in here as well. But one thing that's important here is you can actually pay with gold. And so kind of like what we talked about on that last meeting, imagine the ability not just to scan an ecosystem and automatically pay, but to actually pay and purchase real physical gold. So imagine, for those that are not aware, I should have, you know what, I might have one here. Let me see if I do. I do. Good. Okay, so, I even have money. Oh, that's funny. Somebody gave this to me. It's got 2024 and Mr. Trump on it. That's great. So what I'm showing you here, and I'm actually going to change a real quick view. What I'm showing you here is a gold back. This particular one is out of South Dakota. Okay. So for those of you that this may be the first time you're actually seeing something like this, this is actually real gold that is actually has a clear cellophane on the front and back. It's not cellophane, but they've worked very hard to be able to take gold, melt it down into a way that at the cellular layer, they can actually turn it into a type of foil. And the way that this foil works, it's kind of like a dollar bill, right? So you can kind of see, the similarities there. This is not a real dollar bill, but you can see this. I would argue that what's the difference between this? Anyways, I won't go there. But notice the size difference. So this is one gold back, okay? And different states can have different gold backs based upon their legislation and their laws. Currently, they're in South Dakota, Utah, Wyoming. There's 2 states that are being announced, and I shouldn't say anything because I'm under contract not to, but make a long story short, they're in about 5 different states today. And hopefully every state not only has a physical currency like this that actually has real wealth to it. This translates to about $4.60 in US dollars for one of these, okay? Now, if I were to melt this down, this particular one is 1/1000th of a troy ounce of 24 karat gold. So if I were to actually melt this down, that's what it would equal in weight. Okay, so this is actually real currency. And if you look close, this currency actually is serialized, which means it has a particular serial number that's to it. So this particular one is right there. Okay, and imagine the ability to actually pay for an asset. I'm going to pull up on this right screen. Imagine the ability to actually purchase something like this, but you can actually digitally snag it in real time. And when you digitally get it, you physically also get in a vault that is audited and insured a serial number, which you actually will get when you purchase a digital gold back or a digital asset. I can't be specific at that point. But imagine if you could actually purchase it and have a digital representation of what that actually is or was. And if you say, you know what, I'll just pass it around as though it were an asset, and I could pass it from one currency to another currency if that other currency actually had a gold backing to it as well. So if you're following what I'm saying, every state can have its own physical currency and its own digital currency, as well as every country or kingdom or nation or principality. Now, if that's the case, could they transfer from one to another as long as there was good auditing and accountability and insurance? And some of the actual storage of these are in real vaults, in real mountains, in real granite mountains with real live ecosystems, guards, blah, blah, blah. About 10, 15 years ago, we actually put some of the data centers inside of these same vaults, not thinking someday we would actually put gold in this type of thing. But just think about this turning physical into digital, kind of like what you're seeing here. So, and they also have one thing I think is really beautiful, amazing, is every one of them has a design that actually has a woman on it, life. So there's representation, not just, and I can only imagine what the first Hawaiian one will be. That'll be just amazing. But I would just, and imagine if it's not just a mother, but a grandmother. And the importance around the role that I think is very forgotten or intentionally forgotten. But that's one thing I really love about this organization and how they actually do some of the designs and rollout around recognition. I don't know if I won't even comment on that, but hopefully you're clicking in your head. You buy a physical gold back or the representation of, and the goal is to work with them long term. Wonderful folks, totally engaging in the right way. And they're also based out of Utah. And for those of you that are not aware, in the state of Utah, you can actually use gold and silver as a currency for purchasing items. So some of the problems of adoption is how do you actually get the merchants to accept these? And then where do you find the market for them? And I really believe that what we're talking about and contemplating here can actually change that. So imagine if you could actually, with a credit card or with a bank, direct payment from a bank or a wire, be able to purchase this gold and actually be able to then hold it in a way that is unique for humanity. So that's basically what you're looking at here. These are advancements that we're currently working through. We talked about this last week. There's some advancements we can't talk about just yet, primarily because from a disclosure standpoint, we've made some commitments not to. But as you guys always are the first to kind of learn about it, that's where it's at. So imagine you can actually process an order, paying for it with this, and then checking out, getting your identity, etc., and then working through the process of being able to have that identity actually realized. Now, some people may say, how are they going to actually accept it? And that's one of the reasons why we're trying to physically actually get, I don't have their cards with me right now, but I found it very interesting when I asked these officers that I was trying to get some level of, dispute. They were like, well, we've already heard it on the license plates. And I actually pulled out my driver's license. My driver's license is what they had the issue with. And it's actually really issued by a real ecosystem. The problem is it's something that they just haven't seen before, but that's where they were having the real issue, was actually on a driver's license, which would have actually missed the whole point. But yeah, so I'll leave that be. One of the next things that we hope to have advancements on this week, either it's going to go one way or it's going to go the other way, is an opportunity of what you're seeing here. And I won't spell out the details, but if you just look closely, there'll be something here that a lot of folks may find valuable. So that's basically that. We're continuing forward on some of the homes. We're actually going to raise about $5 to $75 million for some of the Clear Homes environments, and we're currently in the starting process of that. That's going to be raised from accredited investors and possibly non-accredited investors throughout the United States and world. So there's some additional interactions that need to occur there and a lot of work, but we look forward to making that become a reality. That reminds me, Charles, we need to talk. There's lots of stuff moving around, so I'd love to bring you up to speed. With that being said, we're right in the middle of 4 different environments. When I say environments, I'm talking about cultures that are native cultures that have been here a lot longer than most of the systems that we're discussing. What I find interesting is when we look at the history of Vanuatu, it goes back about 3,500 years. When we look at some of the history, and Charles, you can correct me, it goes back about 2,200 years. And then when we talk about some of the environments here, like particularly this gentleman that's actually here, he looks at, and many within the Hopi ecosystem look at the Hawaiians as their grandfather. And what you're seeing here is actually Mr. Stone taking a video of this gentleman singing for a daughter that he lost in a fire that would then had another individual, this amazing girl, with this individual. And they actually went through a ritual, which is too sacred to actually mention here, but it's a type of adoption where she was actually help fill a void. I don't know that the void will ever be filled, but to help to be able to align something that is just amazing. And I hope within the next year, what is envisioned here is basically a congregation of folks that come together in a very particular way and have grandmothers that actually come together, linked together with a particular prayer and with particular elements tied to bloodlines. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. It's not my place to be able to discuss that, and it's inappropriate. So, but with that being said, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of updates. I won't continue kind of dig in, but if you have any questions, thoughts, feedback, now is a good time to ask.
I have a question, Michael.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so I buy a gold back. It is serialized, and I turn it into a digital gold back.
Okay.
And then I go and I buy a dozen eggs. So now I'm paying with my gold back. So does the serial number transfer over to the merchant? How does that?
So if you are paying with a gold back that's digital or physical, you're paying with digital.
Digital. Let's say
Okay.
digital.
Okay.
So how does
you can actually take the physical ones if you want to transfer them. You pay for shipping and insurance out. You can also actually lock them up if you'd like. You can lock the physical ones up for a period of time, and you can actually make you can make interest on those ones while really what's happening is you have massive dilution going on and inflation going on in the financial systems. But tying to this, you'll actually have the opposite approach. So as the systems go down, you can basically go up. So that's one approach, is you actually don't touch them. But let's say you want to touch them, you want to buy a dozen eggs, and you want to spend it with the digital asset. Okay. So let's say that you actually spent $4.50 or $4.60, which is the fair market value for this guy. We are actually going to have, and this is not formal, but this is what was talked about recently, even as recent as today, having serial numbers that are dedicated to us in a particular vault that would be assigned to particular individuals. And as that serial number actually moves around, it would go with that asset. So we have to figure out how they're actually serialized, tokenized, and then sell them within those ecosystems. So just like with normal currency, can we break them up and fractionalize them? Sure. But in the use case that you just talked about is a very good one. Let's say your eggs were $4.60. This one unit and serial number would transfer over to that other user.
To the merchant.
Yes, you got it. You got it.
Okay. All right. I was just wondering about that because if you leave them in the vault and they're serialized down. Okay.
Okay.
That makes sense.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Great
Yep.
question. Really good questions. Anybody else? Thoughts, feedback, comments, observations, craziness? Come on, this is exciting stuff, folks. Let's hear it. Everybody's on mute. Okay. Okay, well, if there's no other questions or thoughts, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Oh, there's some. How is the value assessed? Gold back. Okay, let's go back. So I assume your mic's not working. I'll go ahead and have the system read it.
How is the value assessed of gold back? The gobbleback is twice the price of gold.
Jeez. Is that what you meant to ask there, Charles? Yeah. So how's the assessed? So the assessed value is technically not twice the price. It's actually, as of today, it's 73% of the price. And what that is basically the difference of the minting. And so imagine if each country were to create its own gold standard and back with an asset like these, there's actually a minting process and price. And that's one of the reasons why, Clear Finance needs to start up. We'll raise money to actually help parts and pieces of it. But ultimately, some of the gold-backed institution, I think they've done a really good job of, even though there's an increase in percentage of value over spot, and I think that's what you're really driving at. That's how it's got to be. Hopefully, and one thing I've really learned, and I met with some of the original individuals many years ago, but I actually just recently watched a video on how they were talking about how much it cost to actually take. And when you think about it, they're taking and actually drop by drop, like literally building this foil out of it. And it used to be really expensive. It's actually come down a lot compared to what it was. But I do think there's going to be a volume issue. And I do think the right thing to do is to provide people, just like you and others, to say, you know what? I don't care if it's in this usable form. I actually want to buy silver in bullion or gold in bullion. So it's not in this form, but I want it to be closer to the strike price, and I want it to be insured, and I want it to be audited, and I want it to be serialized. There's really no reason why that can't be the case. So that's what we plan on doing. You'll be able to purchase in a couple different areas. So imagine one, you can buy gold bullion, silver bullion, gold backs, or you could convert into real world currencies like US dollars, etc. Those are the most value and liquid assets that humanity currently can trust when you have the depletion or implosion of certain physical assets. All right. Is your mic not working, Charles? Is that what's going on? No? You're mute these days. Okay. So here, I'll have this read.
Wouldn't it be cheaper to buy physical gold by the say 10-gram weight than serialize that?
Yeah. So we just answered that, and that's yes.
Is there enough physical gold to cover, say, the Texan country assets or Hawaiian kingdom assets?
I can't answer that. I've been told that there is, but to be honest with you, when I've asked the questions, how much gold is there in the world? A lot of people speculate that they know, but when you really dig into it, it's unknown. Primarily because a lot of the reserves are private reserves. So with that being said, and I personally, this may sound really crazy. There's another good question. Let's see what you got here.
Can land be serialized as an asset?
Happens, yes. Why not? Good question. Good question. One of the things I would throw out is, could you actually loan against gold or land? And if you loaned against it, would it be income? So there's so many different things that we could talk about, but they're all very important topics. And hopefully, and one of the reasons I love connecting with you guys in real time is you come up with smart questions like this and help us to make sure that there's good thought and understanding as we advance. So other thoughts, questions, comments, feedback, anything? Good question, Charles and Danielle. Okay. I'll give you another 30 seconds. If there's no more, then we will adjourn, even though there's so much good stuff to talk about. Love you guys. It's good to connect with you. I'm sorry that we were a little tardy today, but it was well worth it. So, and Charles, kia ora. I hope we're able to have a little meeting later on. There's two big topics we got to go over, by the way. So it's not just some of the advancements within the Hawaiian Kingdom, but yeah, some of the topics on some of those other things that we mentioned. So, all right, everybody. Well, we will talk to you next week, same time. As a matter of fact, we will be standardizing on 5:30 Mountain Time. There will be a couple interviews this time next week. I don't think it's going to overlap with this time, but hopefully you'll see a bunch of fun interviews that are popping. If not, I'll send you a link to it. So, aloha. Sayonara.